Hello and welcome back to Johnny's Kitchen. So today I harvested some of the last of our Swiss chard. So this would have been sown last late summer or early autumn, and this has given us great crops all the way up to winter. We've had pickings through the winter. Obviously it's not growing much then, and then it gives you another flush in the spring, at which point it tries to flower, and we're at that stage now. So I've got two different chards here. I've got a white stem chard and a red stem sort, and we've just pulled the red stem plants out today. So this is the last of my rhubarb chard for this season. We've still got more of the white stem sort, and I've got the next crop is on its way. So if you're not familiar with it, chard is very closely related to beetroot. It's essentially the same plant, but whereas the beetroot was specialized for a swollen root, this has been selected for its leaves and the ribs. And of course you can eat the leaves from beetroot plants. I don't tend to do it because I want those leaves to be feeding those roots. So I leave those alone. If I want the leaves, then I grow Swiss chard. And this comes in an array of different colors, some of them frankly rather gaudy, but you see the same sort of colors that you get with beetroot. So there's naturally the red sort, as well as whites and yellows, oranges and so on. And I think there's a similar relationship between the flavors of the different colors with the leafy Swiss chard as there is with the beetroot itself. So the red beetroots, they have that characteristic earthy flavor. And then if you move to something like maybe the Chioggia beetroot with its striped red and white center, that one has a little bit less of the earthy flavor, maybe a bit more sweetness. And then when you go down to something like one of the golden beets, there's very little of that sort of classic earthy beet taste. And I think that's probably the same sort of thing you get with the chard as well. So the white one, it has some of that earthiness, of course, it's always there, but much less than the red stemmed. And it depends, some people don't like that earthy taste, in which case I think the white stemmed or yellow stemmed is probably the best sort. But if you do like that earthy flavor, and I do, then the red stemmed ones have, I think, more of that, generally speaking, than the white. So we often grow a bit of a mixture for that reason. I actually prefer the form of these white stem sorts. You get a much bigger rib, and we like the rib. Now I know some people that grow this, they're not that keen on the ribs, and they generally just use the leaf, which is fine, but I think the ribs are excellent, and they make this quite a versatile veg. I mean, you've got two vegetables in one here. You've got the ribs you can cook separately in a completely separate dish or at a different stage in the process. So you'd probably want to start the ribs off first and then add the leaves a little bit later. This is probably my favorite of the leafy veg because it's so versatile, and it's great in a gratin, it's wonderful in a frittata. Just slice up the ribs, cook them off with some onions, then add the leafy greens, and then make the frittata in the usual way with some eggs and cheese. That is absolutely delicious. Really good way to use the chard. Today though, I'm going to make one of my favorite dishes with this. It works well as a side dish, or you can turn it into a main dish. You could add it to some pasta or enhance it in various ways to make the chard the center of attention. But I most often make this as a side dish. It's very simple, very quick to make, but really rather tasty. So the ingredients, well, as always, garlic, can't live without that stuff. Then I've got the chard, and I've got some onions. Now these have come straight from the garden, just like the chard, and these are overwintered Japanese onions. So I planted these out as sets last autumn, quite late in the year, and I put these out quite close together. So initially I spaced these 4 inches apart. That's already pretty close. And then I filled in with intermediate rows. So at the moment, I'm taking out those intermediate ones, trying to avoid the larger bulbs. As you can see, these are starting to bulb up quite nicely already. And my favorite onions, they're always going to be grown from seed because the range of varieties you've got is so much bigger and, to be honest, so much better than those you can get from sets, or generally speaking, occasionally you'll find sets of a particularly nice variety, and that's fine. I do like these overwintered onions though, because they give you a really good bulb early in the year. And I take these for the salad, they're great for that, and as they bulb up, they can become a normal part of our meals. So if I'm making this later in the year, with say an autumn crop of chard, obviously I'm going to be using a dried onion from storage. Now I don't have the green tops, but these are great for this today. And yeah, although we're not growing any of our main crop onions from sets, I really do like to use those overwintered ones to get that nice early crop. These work great as spring onions. We've been taking them for weeks already, and now they're starting to provide quite a good little bulb there, quite handy. So they can be planted really close together because I don't care about the bulb size really, and some of those may bolt. It's my experience that very often those overwintered onions, quite a few of those may bolt, but again I don't care because I'm not planning to store those. I don't care if they make it to full size. Quite a few will because I've got a lot of them, but they are there to provide me with fresh onions until the seed sown onions are ready, and they won't be ready for quite a long time, and they're not much bigger than a spring onion at the moment. So I certainly can't get that sort of bulb from my main onions, and I don't want to touch those until they are mature. Right, enough waffle about the veg, let's get on with it. So preparation is really very easy. I'm going to divide these into 2 parts, just like the chard. I'm going to take the leafy part off. This will be cooked a little later, so I'm just going to slice through that. You could chuck this all in at the beginning, but I think it's probably better to throw that in at the end. So I will cook those with the leafy parts, and I'll just get rid of that part. And this part, the bulby bit, I will just slice up, and we will cook these with the ribs. With the chard, I'm just going to take most of that rib out, not all of it. I don't have to be too fussy. The leaves I can just tear up, and they will go in with the green bits of the onion. And the ribs, I'm just going to slice those reasonably finely. That will be fine. And that's it. So I'm going to work my way through that, and that's the prep done. Oh, apart from the garlic, of course, but slice or chop as you like. The only thing I really care about is that there's plenty of it. I quite like large pieces of garlic in it, so I'm just going to coarsely slice that. One more ingredient, the final ingredient, and this is not homegrown. I've got some frozen peas. I eat tons of peas. There's just no way that I will grow enough to have a year-round supply of those from the freezer. So we did freeze quite a lot last year, but they've been gone for many months. I don't mind using frozen peas, actually. They are really great. It's one of those vegetables there where the frozen vegetable is perfectly fine. These, of course, they are much sweeter than a homegrown pea, I think, in general. And they have less pea flavour. So if I had my own, and I suppose I haven't overwintered any this year, but I think if I had overwintered some, say in the polytunnel or one of the greenhouses, you take an early variety and you plant it in the autumn as you would for overwintering broad beans, then they should be ready at this time of year. We're already picking broad beans, and actually broad beans would also go very nicely in here, but the peas are the perfect ingredient in this because that sweetness goes really well with the earthy flavour of the chard. So they're still frozen. All I'm going to do is just pour over some hot water and defrost those. Really not a good idea to add them to the dish while they're still frozen. That makes a bit of a mess of it. Just takes the temperature right down. Right. I will finish working my way through this pile of chard and then we'll get cooking. So if you can hear some bubbling in the background, that is just a steamer with some nice new potatoes. But for this veg dish, I'm going in with a good slug of olive oil. And then with the chard stems and the white part of the onions. Now, if this were later in the year and I was using an onion from the store, I might start the onion just a few minutes before I put the chard stems in. But today, that's a fresh onion. I'm going to start those at the same time. So I'm just going to cook those gently for a few minutes, and then I will add the leaves. Again, if you're using fresh peas, they want to go in a little bit sooner, but because mine are frozen, they can go in quite close to the end. I've already defrosted them with that hot water, so it's fine. They just need to saute for a while. So this has softened nicely now, and I'm just going to go in with the garlic. I don't want that garlic to brown. At this point, I can add a little bit of salt and a good twist of black pepper. And before the garlic has a chance to catch, I'm going to get some of the leaves in there. Now there should be enough moisture from where the leaves have been washed. But if not, you can always add a little bit more. And now I've got the green parts of the onions in there as well. So then on with the lid. That should help those wilt down quickly. So every now and then I'm just going to take off the lid and give it a quick stir. If it looks like it's a little bit dry, you can add some water or a little bit of stock if you've got any to hand. I'm just going to use the water that I soaked the peas in. And it should only take a couple of minutes really to wilt those leaves. I don't want to do any more to them than that really. If you cook them too long, they will start to lose their vibrant colour. Now, this doesn't look very pink, this dish, but if you make it with, say, the red stemmed ones, it has quite a pink colour as the colour leaches out of the stems. Now, the leaves haven't completely wilted yet, but they're getting there, so it's time to add the peas. and then back on with the lid for another couple of minutes at the most. And finally, in with a reasonable sized knob of butter. And I'm going to turn the temperature up at this stage. I don't want too much liquid left in the end. And we'll get a nice little emulsion there, and the dish is done. So this is ready now. We're just having this as a side dish today, but you can turn it into a main meal quite easily. We've often done this with some pasta, maybe a little bit of cheese on the top, slam it in the oven, lovely. Anyway, today I'm just serving this with some new potatoes. Those are from the garden, those are Sharps Express, and there's a slightly floury potato, so rather than boil those, we tend to steam them. And then we've got some Swedish pickled herring, and that's one of our favourite things to have with our new potatoes. But the whole point of this really is this chard dish, so let's have a little taste. Make sure I get some rib and leaf there. It's delicious. That white chard doesn't have much of that earthy flavour. So, and in the cooking and with the peas, the sweetness of the peas, there's not too much of that earthy taste. So if you're a little bit unsure about the chard and you're not that fond of the earthy beetroot flavour, then look for one of the white or yellow ribbed sorts. I think there's less of it in there. And with the peas and the onions, that makes a really tasty dish. So all of that is more or less seasonal now. The peas, if you're lucky and you've got an overwintered crop, then you might just be getting those in. The new potatoes, of course, are coming in now, and they are delicious. Chard, you might have that either from an overwintered supply or from an early sowing this year. Either way, it's a delicious veg, and it makes a very quick and easy meal. So that is all for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.